Hey, what's up, guys? Red Bishop here of the Press A to Listen podcast, and time for another video review, this time around for a game called Lifeless Planet. It came out for PC about the middle of last year, but it is now available this month on the Xbox One, and it's an interesting game. It has some cool concepts. Some of the stuff it does very well. Some of the stuff it does kind of average, but it's not a terrible game by any means, and we'll explain that as we go along. But first off, if you've never heard of Lifeless Planet, you play as this astronaut on, a lifeless planet, or so to speak. You'll find out whether or not it's lifeless or not as you progress through the game. But it is an adventure slash puzzle platformer. It kind of starts out as more of an adventure type game, and then as you progress, they introduce the platforming mechanics and then the puzzle mechanics and stuff like that. So that's one thing I think they do well, is the progression of when they show you stuff, or when they decide to let you have these certain abilities and mechanics in the game. I feel like they do a good job of ramping that stuff up. The downside to the actual gameplay itself is the actual platforming. There are times where you could tell when you're playing the game, the path they set up for you is kind of lit up in green, or they have footprints in the ground or whatever to let you know you need to go this way or that way. That's all fine. Obviously, you need that because with the type of game it is, it doesn't necessarily reward you for exploring, but it kind of wants you to go out and kind of look at some of the areas in the game. But when it comes to the actual platforming, sometimes it's very difficult to figure out where you need to go. Like I said, when you're on a path, when you're just walking, it kind of highlights where you need to go. But when you're jumping and when you're going from, on a rock or something like that, sometimes it's difficult to figure out where the next point is you need to be at. And then you add into the fact that when you first start out, you have two jumps. You have a jump, and then when you hit the A button again, it kind of gives you a little jetpack boost. So you kind of basically have a double jump. As you progress through the game, there are certain areas where you'll have upwards of 5 to 6 jumps. So basically, when you're kind of going to the tough areas of the game, the later stages of the game, you'll have that. But when you first start out, and the double jump kind of comes off as not being enough. It feels like it's barely enough in certain circumstances. So there'll be one situation where you need to jump from this ledge to a rock, and it might take you 2 or 3 tries to do that because you have to figure out the timing of the double jump. It's not a regular double jump where you immediately go higher. It kind of gives you a little ability to go further with your jump. So you need to hit it kind of like mid first jump. So you jump, when you get to the middle of that jump, you hit it again. So that kind of gets some, you got to get used to that. And that's something that I did as I progressed through the game. And it's something that most people will have to get used to because it's not the type of double jump they're used to. Now, when you get to later stages in the game, when I mentioned the 5 or 6 jumps you get, that is when you hit that, you go higher and higher. So it's kind of a traditional multiple jump. Now, the actual exploration of the game I mentioned a little bit, that's there to an extent. The majority of the game is actually pretty linear. And when I started the game, and I know a lot of people might think this when they start it, you see this vast array of places you can, conceivably go. And in actuality, you can go there, but it usually just ends up in being a dead end. So actually, there's these collectibles you can find. They're called minerals, basically kind of like little flowers that you can find, and it tells you a little bit about the planet and stuff like that. But in actuality, you can kind of just go to the straight path, and you're not really missing a ton of stuff. Now, there are some areas in the game where you kind of have to go off a little path here or there to progress the game, to unlock this puzzle or to finish this puzzle or whatever. But for the most part, it's actually pretty linear, which disappointed me a little bit, but not to the extent where I felt like I didn't want to play the game anymore. I kind of wanted to see where the story ended up, kind of wanted to see what the next gameplay mechanic was they introduced and stuff like that. The story itself actually has some pretty good mystery to it. Just when you think you've kind of figured out what's going to happen or what's coming up next, they kind of throw a little curveball at you. And so I feel like they do a very good job of telling what this story is, and why you're on this planet, why you're thinking this way, why you're acting this way, and why this stuff is appearing and everything like that. They do a very good job of explaining that and filling out the story with both voiceover and a little bit of backstory with kind of audio notes or books or anything like that you find in the environment. So I feel like they do a fantastic job of that. And that's about all I'm going to say about the story because I don't want to spoil it. Like I said, they throw some fantastic curveballs at you towards the middle and obviously the end of the game. And if you have a headset, I highly suggest you wear it because the music and the atmosphere is amazing. When you're going through these, you're kind of just walking through these environments, these forests or these, mountains or these cliffs or whatever, they do a good job of amping up the music and the atmosphere. So there are times when you're walking and there's nothing happening around you. There's no music. There's nothing. All you'll hear is your footsteps. And that kind of builds tension. And they do a fantastic job of building up tension. And as you're going through, you'll kind of There'll be an area where you don't hear anything. And then as you walk 2 steps forward, all of a sudden music starts playing. And so like the ability to do that, and ability to ramp up the music and ramp up the tension and stuff like that is extremely well done. A few more things to touch on here before we actually wrap this up. There's no combat in the game. So if you're going in there thinking you're going to battle some aliens or something like that, it's not going to happen. It is straight up an exploration puzzle platformer, and I feel like that's what they should have done from the get-go. I feel like if they would have added any sort of combat or anything like that, it would have diminished the overall experience of the game. So I feel like them not including it was actually the right decision. And when it comes to the actual exploring, I didn't mention this earlier because it's kind of slipped my mind. You can die in the game. So obviously you can die from falling off of jumps or falling off of platforms. But there are different things in the environment, like plants that can kind of eat you, that are little spikes that can come up and get you. You can, in a certain level later on, you can burn due to lava. So, I mean, there are different ways to die. You can run out of oxygen, obviously. Since you're an astronaut, there are times where you can run out of oxygen. And when it comes to running out of oxygen and getting that kind of quadruple jump that I mentioned earlier, those are kind of set up in set story moments. So in set story moments, you'll run out of oxygen. You need to run to a certain place and refill it. If not, your character will die. When you get the kind of quadruple jump or the 5 jumps, you get that, and then as soon as you're past that certain area where you needed it, the game will take it away. So you don't get that, and you stay with it the whole game, which I understand it to an extent. They kind of have to take stuff away, give you stuff and everything like that. But I feel like if they would have kept that, or at least given you more than just the double jump at the beginning, I feel like the platforming would have done a little bit better. It would have felt a little bit better, but unfortunately they do not do that. And the actual length of the game, there's 19 chapters. It took me about 5 or so hours to complete the game, depending on, you know, how much you want to explore the environment and stuff like that and get all the minerals, collectibles and stuff. It could take you upwards of 6, 7, or 8 hours. And with the game being $20 right now on Xbox One, $16 if you have Xbox Live Gold, I feel like if you're a type of person who likes puzzle platformers, I feel like this is a good game to pick up. I enjoyed my time with it. Like I said, once I got past kind of the initial controls of the double jump and the platforming itself, which took me about 30 minutes to an hour, the first 30 minutes to an hour, I feel like I started to enjoy the game, and I kept playing it and playing it and playing it. And there was one time I played it for 3 to 4 hours straight, just trying to see how far it would take me to get to the end of the game. And so I really enjoyed it. I think the platforming is kind of hit or miss, but the story itself, the atmosphere, the music, I feel like all that is top notch. So I would recommend it, even at the $16. If you're kind of on the fence, yeah, maybe wait for a sale if you're not really big into puzzle platformers. Again, no combat, so don't go in thinking you're going to fight aliens. But with that, that's going to do it for the review of Lifeless Planet. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and have a good one.